cybercriminals are working overtime. Last year in the fourth quarter alone, phishing attacks disguised as COVID testing information increased by 521%. Barracuda has identified 13 types of email threats and how cybercriminals use them to steal money from your company or personal information from your employees and customers. Find out about the 13 email threat types and how Barracuda can provide complete email protection for your teams, your customers, and your reputation. Get your free ebook at securityweekly.com/Barracuda. That's securityweekly.com/Barracuda. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. Hey, I added something new. I know we talk about securityweekly.com/subscribe like a lot. Make sure you go there, tell all your friends, and when you go there, right at the top of the page, you can click the link and go to something that I created that I'm calling Podcast Episode Starter Packs. So I have 2 Spotify playlists that I spent probably way too much time collecting and creating. There's a lot of episodes in our archives, and there's some really great episodes in our archives. And some of them, you know, the internet, it kind of falls off the internet. Like if the internet were flat, like it fell off the edge. So I've resurrected some of those, and I've put together 2 playlists for you on Spotify that represent some really awesome episodes in our archives. The first is called Security Weekly Classics. The other one is called Security Weekly Panels. The other one is called Security Weekly Nerds. So it's 3 playlists that if you want to get someone started on the show, or you just want to dip back into our archives and hear some really interesting and cool episodes, go to securityweekly.com/subscribe. Click that link, Podcast Episode Starter Packs. I'm working on more, so Stay tuned.
Nice. Hey, I need another ice cube before we get.
Oh yeah, we should totally do that. Mr. Joff Thayer is here with us this evening. Now he has joined us. Joff, welcome, my friend.
Hello, g'day, good evening, good something. It is good to be here. It has been a little while, but
way too long, my friend.
Here I am.
Hey, nice to have you here. We're gonna dip into the news. Mm-hmm. What do we got brewing this week?
An ice cube
in the news. We need we need ice cubes. It's very important.
Yes,
that was such a subtle reminder. So subtle.
There's an
right. Just dropped it right in there. It's like, give me my ice cube.
Hey, did you guys hear that Elon Musk bought Twitter? I'm sure you didn't see that.
There's this thing going around that says Elon bought Twitter.
Right. I love the fact that Elon Musk bought Twitter, 2 weeks after the NFT of the first tweet, which was bought for $2.9 million and put up at auction for $29 million, didn't sell for $3,600, the highest bid.
Well, the closing bid was $280, but bids came in after the auction closed for up to $3,800.
And that was a $2.9 million NFT
investment. Yep. Commemorating the first tweet ever.
Why did it? Shouldn't go. Well, I don't understand the economics.
Well,
behind
what
that,
I like is a local reporter up here said, "Of course not, because NFT is dumb."
Not sure the owner of that NFT had more choice words, but
NFTs are interesting. I think they're fascinating. I don't think they're really the way they're using them. I don't think is really valid. Yeah, I think using it as a way to validate an identity of an object. Cool, no problem. Sounds good. Object.
What do you guys think about the open sourcing of the algorithm and the specifically security implications of said open sourcing of the algorithm?
The bot detection and all that.
Well, Elon has said he's making plans to make Twitter's algorithms public, which is kind of broad, all of the algorithms, some of the algorithms, select algorithm, what I don't quite understand what is being made public. My fear in reading that, a couple things security related, is open source software is not necessarily any more or less secure than commercial software.
Yep.
Right. We could have that debate, but whether it's open or closed, I don't think dictates the security necessarily. It could also, for me, open up a cat and mouse game, depending on which algorithms that we're talking about. If it's algorithms related to advertisements, as an example, that could be a cat and mouse game. oh, if I understand the algorithm, that means I could construct advertisements that get better placement.
Yep.
Essentially hacking the system. And then Twitter goes, oh, well, we're going to fix that and change the algorithm. But the algorithm's still open, so now I'm going to find and it's just going to be this like endless cat and mouse game.
And quite honestly, I think that improves. Cat and mouse games improve everything sort of over time.
I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, just an outcome that could have never-ending repercussions. But like you said, Larry, not necessarily horrific. Although it depends. YouTube, for example, is very, very tight-lipped about their algorithms for how they categorize content. Because if that stuff gets out there, people are going to do like horrible things on YouTube. I don't want to see the same thing for Twitter, although there's already really horrible things that go on all social media platforms. Yeah, sure. And largely those algorithms are not public. So.
I think one of the things that I think Elon has said, and I'm reading between the lines here, by publishing some of these algorithms and looking to validate every human effectively, I read between the lines that he wants to eliminate bots. And he's also and tying this to some of the other things he said, that he also believes that everyone should have a voice and freedom of speech. Even his critics should be able to have a voice. And this is good. And I'm thinking just back to a book I read that I know you poo-pooed really bad, which was This Is How They Tell Me the World Ends.
Sure.
But thinking about, I read through the entire book, and what was really eye-opening to me was that there was definitely some finger-pointing, and there was allegedly evidence that Russia had leveraged social media platforms to affect the election. They didn't hack any voting machines. No, they hacked people's perceptions through that.
Sure.
And I can see that Elon doesn't want to see that happen. So by publishing that and validating humans, that we could potentially avoid that situation again.
Well, I think in Twitter's earlier years, there was much speculation that they kind of did a lackluster job of preventing bots, because a bot was essentially a new user, and when trying to boost your valuation to increase the value of your company, you want as many in social media games and subscription-based software companies in general. You want as many subscribers as possible, and if some of those happen to be bots, it's okay. A few bots is all right because our numbers are still good. I think Twitter's kind of beyond that point. Like, you won the short message social media platform. Like, you're the clear winner now. So I don't think that's so much of a concern. So now it's time to take that stance and say, like you said, Larry, let's validate there are actual humans on our platform.
Yeah.
Tyler, you all right? You all right, man? You got like heinous technical issues going on.
Yeah, I'm curious how we solve some of the issues that Twitter's been working on. I really do appreciate the open voice platform, but it gets really difficult when you see the behind the scenes and like how some of this stuff gets really abused and problems around fixing it. Like, it sounds fairly straightforward, fairly easy. It's really not an easy problem, and the security companies and bots and technology used between AI and ML to build some of these farms and generate a lot of these personas and maintain and curate them, like, it's not an easy problem to fix, and it's probably not going to get fixed right away. So I guess I don't see a ton changing other than staff that doesn't believe in the leadership as far as, what this does for us.
I've already seen people leave the platform, which I think is, I don't know, like, okay. I mean, stick to your ideals. That's fine. I think allowing editing tweets is kind of interesting. I have a thought on that. If it was my call and it was my $48 billion, I'd throw out the idea that you should be able to edit a tweet, but it should only be 1 hour, 60 minutes after you make that tweet, and it should only be once.
I think they should just have all the tweets go to a blockchain. Like, you have to be on the block. You have to have a valid address, and we've already established how to do that properly. So let's just set it in stone. If you want to modify it, sure, go ahead and edit it. The edit happens on the block, and you can go back and read the edit.
If you want to edit your tweet, you need to pay in Dogecoin.
That could fund the platform.
That could fund the platform.
Don't laugh. That's actually not a bad idea. That's like seriously not a bad idea. Right? It's more than likely he will do that, because what's that going to do? No, like, not a joke. What's that going to do? That's going to incentivize the more volume in trades. It's going to allow people to not think about it. It's sort of like Disney. When you go to Disney and you just present your band, whatever thing.
It's a magic band. It's a magic.
You don't
band,
think
Josh.
about it. If I buy 100 Doge so I can edit 100 tweets at $0.25 each, like, okay, big friggin' deal. By the time you're done, it's like Reddit gold coins or Reddit coins. Mm-hmm. You just.
I think you should able to. You should also be able to delegate and let other people edit your tweets. I think that'd be funny too.
Yeah. Tweet edit delegation. That's where the money's at.
Right? Like, here's my close followers. Like, you guys. Like, if I make a tweet, you guys can edit it. Like, it's totally cool. Like, that would be hilarious.
I've run my tweet bot for a long time, and it's actually a little bit of artificial intelligence in my tweet bot.
Yeah.
So it does a fantastic job of selecting out exactly what I want to retweet, so I don't have to retweet stuff. It just does its thing.
I thought that was a bot, John.
Yeah.
I thought that was a bot.
You didn't.
I did. I did.
Do you remember Bill Swearingen's Twitter bot?
Yeah, he wrote a Twitter bot.
Yep.
What did his Twitter bot?
Nice
do? I don't remember.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Anytime someone tweeted something with the word meet, MEET, in it, he tweeted back, it's something along the lines of replacing it with the word MEAT.
Right.
So my bot has a list of people I'm willing to retweet, which is a pretty small list. It has a throttle that'll only retweet about 2 an hour. I mean, it's pretty minimal. And it also has a list of words within a tweet which I consider not so good, and I don't want to retweet it. So if it has like political things in it, or if it has certain religious things in it, I won't retweet it.
Let me guess, you use a regular expression for that, Jeff.
Yes, I used a regular expression.
Wow. Shocking.
That was such a setup.
That's awesome.
Yes.
Oh, we miss you, Jeff.
I don't have an upcoming class to promote that's within a reasonable time period.
Anything at Wild West Hackin' Fest?
No, I'm actually not planning to be at Wild West Hackin' Fest, Way West. I'm sure everybody will have an excellent time. Yeah. But I'm not going this time around.
What about the Dakotas when it comes out?
Well, we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, that's in the future, right?
We'll see. I'm going to leave the country for a while. Actually, going to go to Australia.
Oh, that's right.
Later this year.
Yeah.
Oh, yay! See family.
Got a lot of catching up to do. There's some relationships to renew and catching up to do, and lots of new babies. The next generation are having babies. It's weird.
Yes, got to go do that. Speaking of babies.
Speaking of babies, Larry, you have a baby story? Or?
No, I was hoping you did.
I don't have a baby story. There is an authentication bypass in Atlassian's Jira, which is
baby.
That's whole baby is right. Like, as widely deployed as this software is, like, just when you think there might be like a glimmer of hope that people are getting the security thing and not producing software with vulnerabilities, now you've got authentication bypass, which most of us, it's one of our favorite bugs to find in a web application or any application, right? Because it's awesome for a lot of reasons. It's in Jira. I mean, Atlassian's an awesome software company. They make so many customers of their software. I mean, awesome stuff. And an authentication bypass just hit me right here, Tyler.
Yeah, that's a shame that, but they'll get it fixed. It's a thing. It just shows you that even shops with well-funded, QA and the whole bit, they still fall into these traps once in a while. So
there's a lot of information in Jira, and it actually does get pretty scary when these levels of vulnerabilities come out. You think about researchers, developers putting keys in there, trying to look at source code. I believe this one even had remote code execution or remote code upload, one of the two, for the mobile app pieces of this. So it was definitely one of the eye openers, and I'm hoping they have an auto patch option, because you do have on-prem for Jira in a lot of situations, but you also have a lot of dependencies because Jira hooks into a lot of things. So that testing and auto deploy, I imagine, may not get pushed out to all customers. And if it does, it probably is. I don't know. It depends on how they fix this. I would be very surprised if this rolls out without some kind of a patch lifecycle that's staged. So that leaves a lot of stuff vulnerable.
So the vulnerability only exists on the on-prem versions. The cloud versions have all been patched. And it is for a very specific configuration, so you do have a little bit of time. But I'm worried that people will just be hammering at your Jira instance if they discover it. So you really should patch it.
That is almost the worst. I mean, that is a good case scenario, but that is almost a worst case scenario, because the on-prem ones tend to be the ones that get ignored from, we'll say, just from my random testing of not scientific numbers, but typically the ones that are managed by internal teams tend to be left a little bit open or behind the patch from the cloud stuff. So,
0 days are being exploited more than ever. Now, if you don't buy into that statement, I think where the data is coming from is it's not horrible, right? So Mandiant and Google's Project Zero have, well, first, the article established they have different scope for different types of 0-day attacks. So Project Zero, for example, they do not focus on analyzing IoT devices that are exploited in the wild. So as like a general gauge of how many 0-day exploits there might be in the wild, not a good measure. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the delta between exploited 0 days in 2020 and previous versus 2021. So Mandiant tracked 80 last year compared to 30 in 2020. Project Zero tracked 58 in 21 compared to 25 the year before. So two completely separate organizations that are tracking 0-day exploits in maybe slightly different ways, right? Both had like over 100%, almost 200% or whatever increase, right, in the number of 0-day exploits being exploited in the wild. That's not like a sponsored survey with all kinds of selection bias, right? I mean, that's raw data. Now the cynic in me wants to figure out why that is and what explain is it. I don't know what could be the cause of that, but the fact that there's two independent companies that are both tracking it and both had significant increases in tracking that is kind of interesting, I think.
So, I mean, what I've noticed, because I'm looking at the SANS News Bites twice a week. I am seeing in the last 2 years way more 0-day related stuff than I'd seen previously, and it's I'm not doing a scientific study, but you didn't see like one a week a couple years ago. It was every few months somebody burned a 0-day. Now it seems like a weekly thing. So either the bar is lower on finding a 0-day, or people are just like, screw it, I'm going to go nuclear.
And well, so one of the things that I found that may correlate to this, and again, not a scientific study or anything like that, is that a number of researchers that I ran into were basically, look, I'm stuck in my house because of COVID.
Yeah.
So I've got this work assignment, and by the way, because I'm not going anywhere, instead of working 40 hours a week, I'm going to spend 120 hours a week working on this stuff because I think this is fascinating, or they think this is fascinating.
Keeping myself occupied by...
I got to do something, and this is fun, so I'm going to spend the next 3 months trying to find some 0-day and something that I think is interesting and having lots of successes. So maybe that's...
If that were true, as things open up, do you see the number go down?
Only time will tell.
I mean, you need to have that remote access, and I would also contribute some of that to the more widely accepted and deployed bug bounties, or companies taking in and tracking some of these 0 days, or offering rewards, or prescribing a CVE to things that they're finding. I think all of that contributes, and I think that's not just really one answer. I think Larry's on. There's more time, there's more remote work, there's not as many people to buy off, there's not as much physical access, and then you have a lot of political things happening. So a lot more things are needed to gain access into places. I think we're having a much broader visibility and testing area being used right this second for means of access. So I think it's kind of all of the above.
Yeah, I agree. It's usually like a number of different things, like Tyler's saying, that contribute to this, not just one or two to sensationalize it, as we often read.
Sure. Tyler's camera is like the force. There's a light side and a dark side.
Windows 11 is
like duct tape.
Awesome.
It's like my brain. Like I'm thinking really good things, and then it just takes a dive. I'm like, I could do some shit with that.
It goes dark, and then yep. Just come to the light, Tyler. Come to the light.
He has come to the light because he's using Windows 11. Sorry.
Probably should have installed Linux. Just saying.
Yeah.
It was hard for me to say that. Anyway,
you came to the light and switched to Windows, Joff.
Actually, I did. There are days that I'm regretting that.
You were enthusiastic at first, and you don't sound enthusiastic.
I was. Here's the biggest thing. I use obviously various Unices all the time, and I was on a Linux box the other day, and I was doing the usual cat grep pipe sort blah blah blah, and I did pipe and typed in find str. I'm like, oh my god, what is going on?
I fully expected you to say you typed dir.
I honestly need to get the thing that's missing on my Windows box is grep right now. I really need to fix that.
Well, WSL.
Yeah.
Right?
WSL 2 for the...
Two.
Oh, yeah. I got WSL all the time, but I tend to do a lot of stuff in PowerShell these days, which I don't mind.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Yeah.
So.
I would agree. Not that I use PowerShell often, but yeah, I can see that.
This, my article number 1 is one I want to dig into a lot more. Oh. I did not have enough time to really fully digest this article. So there's a major cryptography blunder in Java enables psychic paper forgeries. Psychic paper is a reference to Doctor Who.
Right.
I'm not a big... I didn't really... I got to go back and watch Doctor. Then I got confused, like which Doctor, and then... Should I start from the beginning? Do I start with... it's
honestly,
I want to watch it. I have watched some Doctor Who, but not enough.
My opinion on the Doctor Who, start on the modern side.
The modern side.
The new, and go from there.
New is like what, 1990 and above?
No. 2000.
2000s-ish. Because when does it go back to?
It's nice 70s.
70s?
Oh, God.
70s, yeah.
And then go back and start watching some of the vintage stuff.
60s.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I think the early episodes were in black and white.
Yes, they were on PBS here in the U.S. Because I remember watching some of them with my dad in black and white on PBS.
Right. So the psychic paper is the cards are made of causes. The cards cause the person looking at it to see whatever the protagonist wants them to see. That's the Doctor Who reference in the psychic paper.
Yeah, which is one of the modern episodes, for the record.
Okay. So recent releases of Java were vulnerable to a similar kind of trick in the implementation of widely used ECDSA signatures. If you're running one of the vulnerable versions, an attacker can easily forge some types of SSL certificates and handshakes, allowing interception and modification of communications, signed JWTs, SAML assertions, OIDC ID tokens, and even WebAuthn authentication mechanisms. That's really interesting.
Mm-hmm. This is a 10 bug. Like, I don't care what they say. This has been a 10 bug since we've seen it. It is even worse now that we're seeing all the places that this can be abused. Like, just the sheer fact of SAML tokens and JWT, you think about all the refreshes and single sign and SaaS applications relying on that JWT and this crypto, like this is bad. You basically can forge whatever JWT you want, and we've actually been trying to write this into a tool that Corey wrote. This can get really dangerous. You think about capturing traffic and having an invalid cert, you can refresh that JWT. You can make your own JWT and make it valid for anything. Like as long as you've got the parameters correct and it's looking for the right things. Like this is really bad.
What the hell is up with your camera?
He's just noticing it now.
He's showing us what we want to see. It's the psychic paper, whether he's dark or light. Right. So reading
just want to point out.
Yeah,
I started reading this. Yep. And I ran out of time on my first day back from vacation, and I apologize. The Ars Technica article links to another Ars Technica article that its sole purpose is to describe elliptic curve cryptography. Mm-hmm. In briefly starting to read this, it's a very, very, it's not an easy read. But the article seems to do a really good job in just reading through it. Like you could read and understand this if you took it to side.
So I think this article, they distilled it really well down real quick here. And if I can read from the article.
Yeah.
Sophos said about the process. You're selecting some random integers between 1 and n-1. You're computing elliptic curve cryptography multiplication. In the event that one of the outputs is 0, go back to 1 and start over. Mm-hmm. If you do some other computations to derive another figure, if that next figure is 0, go back to step 1 and start over. And guess which check Java forgot?
If it's 0, go back to
either
step
R
1.
or S were 0, they didn't go back to step 1. So effectively, if the R or S was 0, you have, as they said, a digital equivalent of a blank ID card.
Gotcha.
Oops. Yeah.
Thomas Tacek is calling this the crypto bug of the year. Yeah.
So one little subtlety in this sucker. You know, when you read most of it, it says Java 15 or higher. Then way in the middle of the article, it says Oracle listed Java 7, 8, and 11 is also vulnerable. I'm like, oh.
What about 9 and 10?
Fuck.
What about 9 and 10? Right?
Well, they're deprecated, aren't they? I mean, some of those versions are like really short-lived anymore.
Yeah, and if you haven't updated those by now, Lee, to your point, you're probably not going to update them anytime soon.
Well, I know a lot of folks still on 8 at an enterprise level, and they've got extended support. They're keeping it going. They haven't moved past because some of those
legacy
later
tech.
versions.
Well, in Java, I mean, this is the Python problem, except instead of just 2 and 3. I mean, obviously there's more than just 2 and 3, but major versions being obviously 2 and 3. With Java, you've got a lot more history there because it goes back plus 20 years. You've got this problem where you've pinned this code to Python 2, and if you're over 10,000 lines, like that's a lot of work potentially.
Yeah. I mean, legacy tech's a big deal in the Java world, and there's a lot of it. It's the same level of big deal as the C languages. I mean, there's a whole generation of programmers that were indoctrinated, taught, and produced Java year after year after year. So there's a ton of this stuff out there.
I was in college, dating myself now, in the late 90s, and I sat in the first Java class in my college.
Yep.
So you got to imagine, right? Java was being programmed it like existed in enterprise before they started teaching it in college, right? So I mean,
you're talking what, 1995 time frame?
Yes,
right?
Yes, 1995 to 1999.
So the progression tended to be, COBOL, Fortran, one or the other or both, depending on what discipline you were following. Goes to Pascal, which quickly becomes C. Mm-hmm. A little dalliance with C++, and then straight into Java, in terms of the historical
I agree.
shift that we saw over time. C++, and Java all suffer from a lot of memory challenges in terms of the developer having to manage a lot of memory allocation and stuff, and that's sort of gave rise to a lot of this modern framework.
Everyone jumped to Java because it was more memory safe. There was garbage collection, and Sun Microsystems, right, was they were the original authors of Java? Is that?
They were, and they cleaned up because of the ability of garbage collection, because there was so many frustrated C and C++ programmers who had to continuously fix memory leak bugs. Right. They were like, I'm done. I'm out of this. This is crap, right?
Yep.
You shouldn't have to write a garbage collector as part of your every software project, and that was the problem with C and C++.
But Sun Microsystems made the claim, write once, run everywhere.
Yep.
Right.
It also drove a lot of organizations and developers to go, I want to code in Java.
I mean, you remember when we first heard that phrase? When we're thinking run everywhere, are you out of your ever-loving mind or something like that? I couldn't believe it actually worked.
Yeah. I mean, it turned out it was...
Okay, it didn't actually work.
No, it didn't. It was write once and debug everywhere. Really well, what it comes down to. But yeah.
Yep. And, you know, and to make matters worse, I've told this joke before, but what's the 5-word IT horror story? 5 billion devices run Java. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Seen that in
there's a 6-word slide decks.
Oh, there's a 6-word one now?
There's a 6th word to that 5-word nightmare, and that is, of course, log4j.
Oh, yes. That was the gift that keeps on giving. And then there's been the whole series, this pun intended, of serialization, deserialization interface kind of problems, right? And those aren't going away anytime soon.
Nope.
Although we just got a one up from the Discord channel. ICS run Java. ICS device run Java.
ICS devices run Java. The 4-word nightmare.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What could possibly go wrong, right?
And to
run it everywhere. I mean, even if it's your ICS device.
I mean, to that, I'd say even IoT runs Java. That would also be a 4-word one. That would be pretty nightmarish right now.
And you're not going to be able to update that, though. That's the other caveat.
Hey, ICS doesn't need to be updated. It's perfect out of the box.
Yep. Speak of the devil.
I'm really envisioning some T-shirts or bumper stickers coming out of this right now.
Heck yeah. Speaking of which, did anybody read my story number 1 by chance?
Oh, let's do that.
You should.
New generation of IoT botnets is amplifying DDoS attacks. Oh, Deb Ratcliffe.
Wait for it.
She's one. Oh, Larry Page.
Wait for it.
Remembers that. Look at the subject matter expert quote in this article.
Yeah, look at that.
And the author. Well, we know everyone in this article.
Yeah.
Hey, one of them sitting right next to me.
Yeah. And when we there's a story there, and so now we don't have to read the article. Larry can just tell us. Yeah.
Hey, Larry, didn't you do that with? Was that Allison Nixon? You were doing that with the DVRs?
I wasn't going to drop any names.
It
but,
was. It was.
Yeah, it was.
So,
and that
how did you get a mention though? Did it cost a lot?
No, and actually that was the InGuardians Labs. Considering we all work from home, that was here in the studio, episode 300.
Yeah, I was going to say you guys were doing some shenanigans. But tell us
Way
the
to go.
So how did I pay for that? No, Deb actually posted on Facebook, and Deb, Mike Poor, and I are friends. And Mike said, "Hey, I know someone would be perfect for this." So we connected and we spoke a whole bunch, and so as part of that, like it was, how do you, DDoS is coming back. DDoS is being leveraged with IoT, and I'm like, yeah, this is not new. I'm like, it's just getting worse from since Mirai forward. And she's like, wait, Mirai, tell me more. And I said, well, a friend of mine and I sat down here in the lab, and next door in that other room, and she had purchased this DVR that was subject to the default usernames and passwords for the initial Mirai attacks. And we were instrumenting and seeing how it all happened. And now we're infected, and we shut it all down before it nails someone else. And the secrets about that particular box was that if you rebooted it, it went back to default passwords. So if you change the password to prevent Mirai from getting in, and the box rebooted, you're fucked. Yeah. So
my guess would be they stored
the password file on the read-only file system,
an NVRAM, and on boot it copies the configuration from NVRAM
and then
to the temporary files. Yeah.
So it's self-preserving vulnerabilities.
Yes.
I love it.
I like that, Joff. That was very well put.
Yeah. So my sort of take about through the course of the interview was that not much has really changed since 2016 with Mirai. We still suffer from the same problems with default passwords and lack of patching, and people connecting this stuff to the internet that they shouldn't be connecting. Add UPnP exposing the stuff to the internet without your knowledge is also still terrifying. And then, basic protections like set up a separate VLAN, monitor your stuff, know what's getting plugged into your network from either Shadow IT and otherwise. Which, ironically, having spent some time at ESW with Adrian, was sort of the clue to my eye. What all of those types of technologies were the basis of Zero Trust. We're telling you to do Zero Trust, but you can't do this other thing that is the basis of Zero Trust.
What? Well, but these embedded systems, we've talked about them on and off over the years on the show. Just
more on than off, but.
More on than off, but they run the gamut anywhere from like massively vulnerable application layer software, really crappy web servers, built-in command injections, all kinds of stuff like this, all the way to massively vulnerable TCP/IP stacks. I mean, they're just horrible. Right. You got millions of these things getting plugged in, and anything that's got a TCP stack, man, it's a potential amplifier.
Yep. And now one of my opinions on this is that the white box of IoT stuff is making this more problematic. And that was sort of some of the things that happened with Mirai, is that a specific Linux distro that was resold to a bunch of manufacturers was vulnerable. And the same thing continues to happen, we see, but now not only just the white box of the operating system, we see the white box resale of the operating system, the applications, the hardware, and then a story we covered 6 to 8 months ago about the white boxing of the back-end application cloud services. Being vulnerable. Yep. So we did one on this again 6 or 8 months ago on the show that there was an application for like remote control of a bunch of different stuff that you could log into your account. You could monitor it you could do stuff with an app. You could have an account on the web and do the same stuff.
Was that Azure IoT?
No. There was one company that basically built this, and then they could say, "Oh yeah, so Netgear, you want this?" Book, and then within their cloud platform, ka-ching, and Linksys, you want this? Ka-ching, and Xiaomi, ka-ching, and NewSun, ka-ching. Like they were setting up different instances that you could cross potentially instances, and the instances all had the same vulnerabilities.
Vulnerabilities are built into the DNA of IoT and embedded systems, and what you're saying, Larry, is the building blocks for that DNA.
Yeah.
Also have those vulnerabilities and are shared across multiple devices.
I would agree.
Yeah,
I think the IoT botnets are very interesting because, I guess denial of service botnets are interesting because you do have to have a mass number of IPs in order to do a lot of the good denial of services, especially against things that sit behind a Cloudflare or sit behind some kind of denial of service protection. It's when you start to really use the term botnet, we have to be careful and identify those, because the botnets out there like Emotet or like some of the SandSpider ones or TrickBot, all of those are typically initial access brokers that are handing off malware or injecting malware for you. So there's not as many of those, but they're not doing denial of service. So you're 100%. We have to keep an eye on this, because that's really one of the only ways without having access to take something down instantly is you control a botnet and you sell off that access or the ability to do denial of service. Without that mass number, you're limited to what botnets have access into what networks, and then you're relying on a much higher cost, and that barrier of entry becomes a different group.
Well, there's this fantastic new technology that's old called IPv6, and there'll be plenty of addresses available for the botnets in the world of IPv6. We have already reached the point, and we did some time ago, but where ISPs are having to turn V6 loose because they don't have a choice, right? Even in the States. right? Even in the place where we own all the IPv4, right? They're turning it loose. So, yeah.
Does that increase our to denial of service, Joff?
Well, here's the question. How smart are people going to be, right? Because network address translation based security devices that do things like denial of service protection, stateful firewalling, and all that good stuff. Well, you're separating NAT out, right? Now that you're in the V6 world, and I think unless the federal government has managed to drive this a whole lot further and faster than I'm aware of, that the security market surrounding IPv6 is still really, really early, right? And so some of these devices are not really able to handle the stack, and so they're going to get put on the internet directly. It's just going to get worse before it gets better, in my opinion.
I believe it when I see it, though, because like when I got into the field, everyone told me that we're going to reach IPv4 exhaustion, and I need to learn IPv6. And now when people get into the field 30 years later, they're like, we're going to run IPv4, you need to learn IPv6. So.
Still haven't learned IPv6.
Yeah, right.
Well,
I do agree, though, Jeff. Like, at what point does a home, use the home as an example, where everyone's got a friggin' NAT firewall, right? At what point does that start flipping to, I just have a router, and it's not doing NAT, and everything inside my home is...
It can still be a firewall.
And it can still be a firewall, sure. It won't be a NAT. Everything has an address. I've got, 1 million addresses assigned to me, and so does everyone else, and we can all have 1 million addresses, and it's totally fine.
I don't think it's that far off, because all of the precautions we put in place made V4 actually survive well up into about 20. I'll have to look at the graph, but about 2015, 16, right? Yeah. So because there was a wholesale circulation of V4 blocks that was going country to country, because the various regional internet registries allowed you to sell stuff cross-border. But that is now all exhausted, right? So now it's, unless you can find a block that somebody's selling, which is unusual, and the price of V4 is actually going up to get it.
Supply and demand.
You're going to see people look at V6. I mean, you're going to see it, right?
Yep. And I know organizations that have IPv4 address space that is registered to them that they allegedly own that is unused and don't know that they have it.
Yeah, that's a massive issue. I mean,
or don't know what to do with it.
In my case, just don't know what they do.
At least 20 years ago, you didn't quite know what to do with it, so you just hang on because there wasn't much guidance. I think if you're going to reclaim a bunch of IPv4, there needs to be some oversight. Joff, to your point, though, that just can't be U.S. government oversight. It has to be international oversight to distribute and be able to redistribute back. If a lot of universities, as we all know, right, have a bunch of that address space.
Have a ton of, and not only universities, right? So I used to do a lot of consulting work for the regional educational provider in North Carolina, which is MCNC. Yeah. And they're all over the country as well. Those guys in the 90s bought up a ton of Class A's, like just bought them up. And they've still holding on to a lot of them. Now they're selling them off, I think, slowly.
Sure.
As they, because they can profit off of them. But there was a ton of address space that was just flat out by the, sort of the tier 2 network providers just bought.
Yep.
And then it was distributed out to the various universities, and I don't know many universities that truly can. Hell, when I was doing it, we had 2 Class Bs I was managing, which is a crazy amount of address space.
I had 2 Class Bs when I was at university. Yes.
Yeah,
like you said, it's a crap load of.
Yeah, I had 1 Class C,
and you took it for granted, right? Yeah. You tend to be like, oh well, we got it. But when you're not in that world, you're like, oh crap, IP's like a scarce resource,
right? But you didn't always manage it that way. So if you had 2 Class Bs, you would distribute it unevenly, which means if you wanted to sell some off, you didn't have like large contiguous blocks. You had a bunch of smaller contiguous blocks.
Well, I mean, if you were any old network administrator, you would do that. But if you were me, your shit was in order.
Yes. Just a record, when I got there, the shit was not in order. Right? But again, back then.
Blame the predecessor.
Yeah, back then it was like,
how many commercial organizations still have the original /8s, by the way? Anybody know?
There's quite a number of them. I don't know what the actual count is. You can go look it up, but
Comcast picked up a few of them.
I know MIT probably still has a Class A.
It's important to note, and I just looked up the graph, that the exhaustion of V4 of the regional internet registries, that is ARIN, APNIC, RIPE, all of the actual worldwide regional registries, that didn't actually occur until 2011. All right, so that's only 11 years ago now. So we haven't actually been in a situation of pure exhaustion. And then this cross-border sales thing has been going on for the last 10 years, right? So
how did we get here? We were talking about IoT security.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's related.
It is.
It is related.
And IoT almost all typically supports IPv6 by default. So you're spot on. This is actually probably going to get much worse.
Yep.
I love it when Tyler says I'm spot on.
New IoT stuff supports IPv6. Whether or not you know it.
Gives me a lot of people are using the last network I tested was doing
apparently
I don't know if anybody's done this as a pen tester, but I was doing DHCPv6 in their subnet and just giving out addresses to boxes and then just saying, "Come to me, my little babies," right? Anyway,
Lee's got a comment in here.
Yeah. So, my first comment was, I can't believe you only had 2 public Class Bs. I mean, I had 4 when I started working at the lab.
Wow, dude.
But
it was only an R2 institution.
But you're wondering about the government and IPv6. The latest directive basically says 80% of the federal government has to be on IPv6 by 2025, with some deadlines in 23 and 24. And they're actually now tracking it. They're actually having a report out on it. So if the bar needs to go up to support that, if the vendors buy, the government's a significant enough company to finish implementations for it, we win. Sometimes the government mods that the government asks for and stuff, there's not enough volume for it to be cost effective for the vendors, and all it is a PR thing. They can put something gov on their customer list. So I'm hoping it's enough. I mean, it's a lot of IPv6 investment, but I don't know. I just know we have to report out that we're doing it. And be done.
Well, I think it is going to drive some of the security solutions into the space. It depends on how well they do it, though, because that whole class of network stack vulnerabilities is going to reemerge, and we're going to see a lot of that, I suspect, mostly because of the chaining of headers in V6. It's not a straight OSI model in that sense, right? You've got that next header thing in V6, and that can get tricky. So.
Do you remember the first 2 octets of your address space that you managed?
Yep. 192.
Yes.
Yes, I do too. I can definitely
I still got them in my head.
Right.
Yeah.
I can tell you the first 3 octets for that matter.
Yeah. Right.
192, 190.
Regrettably, I can only remember the first octet on the Milnet stuff. It was 10. No, it was 26 to be honest with you. But the V4 stuff was easy. It was 128.15, 128.115, and 134.55.
That's interesting. My university was in 128, and one of them was in 138.
Yeah.
So I got to ask you this question though: how many people committed to memory the 2 Navy NTP servers?
Tick and talk.
Yeah,
not
tick
by
and
IP,
talk, right?
Not by IP.
Not by IP, but by name, right?
Tick.navy.mil and talk.navy.mil.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It ain't stupid.
And how many
it literally ain't stupid. It works,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, all I can say is I don't need any of those anymore. I built myself a nanosecond accurate GPS-based Tier 1 NTP server the other day.
Of course you did.
All righty, let's all hook up to Larry Stratum 1 NTP.
Larry Stratum 1, baby.
No, I can't support all of y'all.
That's some nerd street cred right there.
It's on a Raspberry Pi, but yeah.
How many people were expecting us to talk about Stratum 1 NTP tonight?
You know what? I think, Larry, you should pat yourself on the back for that right now.
It's amazing.
Oh, that feels good.
That feel good.
It does. Yeah.
Do it again.
Can we talk about something else? Like a couple of us triggered on Lenovo.
Lenovo, yes. Let's talk about Lenovo. This was from ESET.
Yeah. I mean, when I was reading about this, I was thinking, the last few weeks we've talked a lot about UEFI issues, and what the Lenovo ones are UEFI issues, and I seem to remember they have company with HP and Dell in terms of getting UEFI right. Mm-hmm. So I was thinking this kind of sucks for Lenovo, but they're not exactly alone in having a problem with their UEFI stuff.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I call it UEFI because I too lazy to say
UEFI is fine by me.
I see UEFI. I call it UEFI.
Is that like OS int?
Yes. No, it's UEFI. UEFI. But UEFI is a standard, right? Like you think about American Megatrends and what are some of the other BIOS manufacturers?
Mm-hmm.
AMI was one.
Yep.
There was others, right?
I keep coming to Mike. Oh, yep.
Intel. Yeah. So, but like we did the interviews a few years ago.
We did
with some of the folks, right? That worked for folks like there was another one that begins with American Megatrends. We just use that as an example. AMI, right?
Yeah.
But like they participate in a consortium.
Yep.
That develops standards for how software protocols and the details of the BIOS or now UEFI, right, will operate. And so they create the standards, and then manufacturers such as HP, IBM, Lenovo, and all, they adopt such standards and either license. I think it works by license. You license essentially the bootloader and the BIOS or UEFI for usage on your particular hardware. So I don't know, like, if some of this stuff, like, I don't know who actually creates some of this firmware. Like, is it Lenovo actually writing the code or writing some of the add-ons to the code that implements UEFI for their hardware? Tyler, you're nodding, right? It's Lenovo has implemented the standard that was created by the consortium, correct?
Yep. Yeah, the OEM takes and creates the UEFI BIOS code for the hardware that they're implementing with inside of their hardware manufacturing.
Right. So there's standard components, but like you said, if I'm whatever AMD or MSI and I'm making a motherboard, right? I gotta take some code, but then gotta customize that code for my implementation of the motherboard and all the devices and the drivers on there.
Yep, and that depends on how you're laying out the architecture of your motherboard, right? Your SMI and SMM, your management integration pieces to the chip. Those are specific to your hardware designs and how you're coding your UEFI BIOS in order to launch and execute your stack with inside of that standard.
Which is why, depending on the manufacturer and the model, how you update the UEFI firmware on your system could differ. Some, like one of the ones I did more recently, was you plug a USB thumb drive into a specific that was designated in the manual, plug it into here, name this file that. When you're booting the system, hold this little button down on the motherboard, and that's what updates the BIOS. But other systems are different. So again, it's implementation specific.
With the way a lot of the new hardware and the way UEFI is working now, you're almost virtualizing. You've taken and moved some of that code execution from like the old Northbridge chips. You've moved some of that into the chip and the SMI and the interaction of that protected memory space. And so something like SPI, where you can do an SPI flash and override that protected memory space, it allows you to put your implant within inside of something that gets executed prior to the operating system and therefore withstands even a BIOS flash at that point. You're not able to validate that UEFI code space that's living between the SMI and the SMM, and that allows you to execute that protected space on boot and evade and hide yourself at below the kernel level of the OS and other security tools.
Because those subsystems have access to the operating system before the operating system boots.
They do, and they have direct memory access not only to the virtual alloc memory of the operating system and the tie-in bridges to the physical hardware and memory, but they also have access to protected memory space that lives off the physical memory on the chip side and where those instruction sets are getting executed.
Yeah, it's all really low. I mean, at the lowest level, it's to light up little LED lights to tell you which hardware components have failed to pass fundamental checks, which is why it needs that low level of access, right? Like building computers, like it doesn't boot. It's a black screen. Okay, what do the lights say on the motherboard? It's because the UEFI has said, I don't recognize that memory, therefore I'm halting and I'm lighting up that LED. And I need low level access to check that memory to make sure that it's either it's compatible or not compatible, essentially.
Well, that's where Secure Boot really starts to come in, and what Secure Boot allows and verifies the integrity of all of the instruction sets, from not just here's your bootloader and boot config to start the OS. It is all of the hardware validations of the integrity of each of those components that is getting loaded into memory to then boot your operating system. And so you have that low level of validation, and Secure Boot interacting with the TPM, which also is storing your hard drive encryption keys. It's storing the validation of Secure Boot. If you're able to bypass Secure Boot, then you're not validating all of the other hardware aspects of what's getting loaded into the operating system prior to security and prior to the kernel loading, which is way before any of the security aspects come into play.
Yeah, and Tyler, not that long ago, we covered a story about some folks, using the TPM is great for using full disk encryption and all that type of stuff. But we saw some attacks against sniffing SPI on boot, in which the TPM would send those the decryption keys over the SPI bus in clear text.
Which is why it's very important to get your BitLocker or whatever you're using for boot. That's why that pre-boot key and putting in that PIN prior to boot actually makes a difference, because that allows encryption to happen. Otherwise, it goes across clear text. It has to be loaded.
But those pins are so hard for users to use, Tyler. We just want them to turn the thing on and it works.
I see.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is why Eclipsium software, I think, is bar none. Well, they're so far ahead of the curve on validating the underlying bare metal and firmware that we're using, not just for this, but you think about IoT, you think about hypervisors and the bare metal that different cloud providers are running on, or hypervisors in hypervisors of what clouds are divvying out for SaaS applications and real-time, Kubernetes clusters. That verification of that hardware and that boot time, without all that, you actually don't start from a clean slate. You have no verification. All the security tools and security stack you've built on top of that, you're not able to ensure that those are valid. So you've really not started at zero. And I think they're ahead of the curve on being able to say, without a shadow of a doubt, from the base root, from a supply chain attack or even just an implant, here we can validate into the OS where our security tools are taking over. You are booting with verified and validated information, which there's no other way to do.
I've heard good things about these Eclipsian folks.
They were sponsor on the show.
Right.
Yeah.
For a while.
Yep.
Scott's all right.
But I think, in any enterprise, when you're booting up a computer or spinning up something in the cloud, you're hitting all of the security controls and vulnerabilities that we just talked about. Which is what's the most exciting part for me, right? Like, this is the most fundamental thing. Like, nothing matters if you're not securing these layers. Like, nothing else matters. It doesn't matter.
Nothing.
All of the boxes you've got don't matter.
Wait, didn't Metallica have a song by that name? Never mind.
So ESA actually did some really great research, and I haven't really dug into exactly what they uncovered here. But Lenovo has patched a list of more than 100 models are affected.
Yeah.
They didn't name this one though, which was funny.
Yeah. I also they mentioned LoJax, right? Like, they need a name for this one. I
18, right? 2018 was LoJax.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The one that I thought was pretty cool about this is that if you've ever worked in any of the federal contracting space, you say, oh, okay, well, you can't bring this in. Okay, we'll just go grab some cheap Lenovo's, and yet you can't bring those in.
Right.
and this is like another box of the yep, score one. Right.
Actually, that in general, the federal government desire to move away from any of the China-based materials really hard to do. Right? I mean, this is not an easy thing.
Yeah.
There is a ton of stuff. I was recently, for various reasons, looking for some hardware that is a router style fanless PC that doesn't have Chinese components in it. It's nearly impossible to find. I can't find one right now.
Get it. Nope. Just that it's really difficult. And hell, I remember we ThinkPad was cool, but when Lenovo bought that part of IBM, not so cool anymore.
Yeah.
So it's tough finding stuff that fits the Buy American model in the federal space. Some stuff not so hard, but PCs, so many components come from overseas. At some point, you have to accept the risk.
Yep.
I mean, you may find. I found some vendors that were Israeli or Swiss, and when I reached out to them asking questions, they said we cannot guarantee the chips.
Here's the problem with accepting the risk. You don't know what you're accepting. Unless you have something that's checking and looking, you don't know what you're accepting. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of scary to me.
And I didn't mean to trivialize that.
As they do, like, you also can't ensure that the supply chain from the American chip maker or whatever is not compromised, and that code is, they have a good CDIC pipeline, they've got a good manufacturing, they're not getting implanted with low-level hardware code from the factory. Like, that's the worst-case scenario. The best-case scenario, the pipeline for the GitHub or the repo for the software developers developing, UEFI, or the device drivers or the utilities like open managed that run on those servers or hardware. Like, what if those get compromised and implant your firmware? So you really don't have. I don't see the supply chain. I think it's a good first step. You need to do it, but I don't see that as the in defense in depth posture to secure your hardware from the ground up.
So I would say I would modify what you said. I'd say target an organization that's already delivering a lot of government contracts and use that process. For example, HP, Dell, Apple, they all have stuff that's meets the government regs for you made in America, and they got skin in the game. Whereas you're buying a white box off of somebody's shelf, they don't have any skin in the game to deliver it. I mean, you still got security beyond that, but you got to get the base to a point where they've got a vested interest in delivering a good product. I mean, counterfeit Cisco is a thing. I mean, we've seen those in the past, and Cisco, they have skin in the game, but at least they stood behind their products and did the right thing when discovered. So, cool. The discovery part.
The other thing I just want to chime in on that. Tyler mentioned something that's really a critical issue, and that is the actual public repositories that are out there and developer accounts getting compromised. This up and down the software stack in the industry is a big deal. Even in red teaming, we find. That if we can get some developer creds, we often can get some traction into a place, and that's not a good thing.
Yeah, no. Get those UEFI developer creds. Gives you the most access. Do you guys want one more reason to not like System D? As if we needed one.
Next.
This one got a name. Oddly enough, Microsoft named it. So which means it'll probably change in 3 months.
Good God. Dude, as long as they're marketing
will get a hold of it.
Nimbus Pwn.
So it'll be 0365 Nimbus Pwn.
Yes. Yeah. It'll be Microsoft Nimbus.
I want to see the
Nimbus
icon.
Pwn 2000.
Directory traversal vulnerability, a symlink race vulnerability, a time of check time of use. TOCTOU, time of check, time of use, race condition vulnerability are all described in Microsoft's write-up on Nimbus Pwn. All these vulnerabilities were discovered by listening to messages on the system bus while performing code reviews and dynamic analysis on services that run as root. An odd pattern in networkd dispatcher, which is a service that listens for changes in the network configuration and I believe automatically reconfigure stuff based on those changes. I believe this is like when you go from Wi-Fi to an Ethernet connection, in Linux, how it automatically knows to switch all of your network connections over.
It knows how to do that? Never mind.
It does, actually. Historically, to your point, Larry, not very good at that. Much better now.
Yep.
But yeah, there's a great kind of diagram on this. There's it's basically like an internal RPC kind of thing that allows the various components to talk to each other to say like, oh, hey, the network has changed, and that's where the vulnerabilities live. I wanted to dig, again, this is one I wanted to dig into more to have a better description of exactly, so an attacker in charge of a rogue dbus service, so dbus is like that internal RPC-like kind of communications protocol.
So this is 2022, the year of the Linux desktop. Sorry.
It's always the year of the Linux desktop.
And I'd argue that slipped away because what was it? Last year was the Linux desktop because so many schools bought Chromebooks to give to their students during the pandemic.
That was a huge stretch.
And now all of them were in school and, well, what the fuck do we do with these Chromebooks?
Well, they upgrade them and they get new Chromebooks.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now, I find that particular story interesting. I know we're sort of moving down on it, but the big one I think is that I think about like WSL2. Microsoft is more and more commitment to Linux and developing and implementing all these services, and the fact that they're looking into them.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, it's a good thing all around.
The culture in Microsoft has clearly outwardly changed significantly, which is really kind of cool.
Yep, I like it.
It's good for him.
I'm reading the write-up. This is a really cool exploit, but I was trying to think, could you teach somebody how to do it, because it is a race condition? I mean, what a frustrating exercise in class, but is it cool.
Race conditions are ultimately frustrating.
Yes. Just run it again. Just run it.
No,
run it again. No, okay, run it again.
Yeah. It's the definition of insanity.
Reboot and run it again.
Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result.
Right.
That's a race condition right there.
Start up a few more programs and fill up your disk a little more, and then do it again. That's basically,
Cron job with random.
Yeah.
But the Microsoft article is really cool, laying out exactly how you exploit it, and as you were saying, Microsoft has really bootstrapped themselves in this field. They are really doing some cool stuff.
Now, Microsoft says there's fixes for this vulnerability, Lee, right? And they've successfully deployed by the maintainer of networkd dispatcher, Clayton Kraft. It's like it comes down to like one person who's the maintainer of this one component that's included in. I mean, this has to be included in probably all Linux distributions. They probably all have their various configurations and maybe have modified it. So who knows, like going back, the maintainer has deployed the fix, and this is why the year of the Linux desktop is a laughable thing, right? Because it goes out to all the Linux distributions, and they all have to maybe fix it in their own. If they've forked this, if they've modified it, customized, backported the whole thing. Yep. That's like in my mind, that's like the one, and it goes back to comments by Linus Torvalds, right? The downfall of Linux on the desktop is the number of distributions and the number of different ways that they're packaging applications for the Linux desktop.
I'd also argue that the number of developers that are responsible for maintaining individual components, because isn't this the one like same sort of thing that happened with Log4j? Like there are two guys that maintain Log4j.
Sure.
Two guys, like it's a part-time thing that they spend 5 hours a week on.
What did you think was going to happen, right? What did you think was going to happen?
Yo, great here. Turn your Linux mail server back on so you can get that email about, updating this.
Oh yeah, no, they have it still on. It just keeps running out of disk space.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, we could run FreeBSD on the desktop. There's the plan.
Ooh, which recently had a Wi-Fi vulnerability.
FreeBSD for the win, baby. Okay. No, OpenBSD for the desktop. Theo lives again, babe.
Wait a minute. Stand by. I want to make sure I'm clear on this one. Yeah, FreeBSD, not OpenBSD. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Yeah. Lee, did you have another story you want to talk about? And maybe we should think about getting out of here. You said something DOD something or other.
No, actually, wasn't a story reference. That was a reference to something else in the Slack channel.
Oh, I have a story that. Go ahead, Lee. If you got a story, cover it, and then I got one more.
Got stories that I've got. I was just going to pick one of the ones we had in common, but go for it. I don't care.
I thought it was really interesting. My story number 15: a $3 billion Silk Road seizure will erase Ross Ulbricht's debt. So Ross was arrested for Silk Road, prosecuted. Part of his prosecution was not just serving jail time, but also
restitution,
paying out $183 million in restitution. The article said that the $3 billion seizure, part of that was in Ross's crypto, one of his wallets, and could be used to pay his restitution. Did I read that right? Is that really?
Well, when they seized it, it wasn't worth $3 billion. In 2015. So
they held on to it?
They held. Well, I mean, what did they do? It's part of evidence in a case where he just recently went to prison. Like,
damn!
It had to sit in an evidence locker somewhere, so that money was sitting in, and then Bitcoin freaking took off.
Does he get the difference?
Nope. You've successfully paid your restitution.
And that's it. He doesn't get the difference, nor did he get pardoned.
Minus 75% of the profit above basis for taxes.
I mean,
Trump didn't pardon him either. This article reminds us of that.
Burden. Okay.
Oh, Lee, you're sidelining again.
No, fuck.
That expression was classic.
I just saw a fuck. Yeah, but like that's the deal. I mean, it could be worse. Like, is he going to get out of prison at some point?
No. He is sentenced to life in prison without parole.
Well, I mean, he could have to pay $183 million back at 20 cents an hour in prison.
Right.
Or now he can have a job in prison and make 20 cents an hour and get ramen from the commissary.
It's a lot of ramen.
Sounds like the IRS needed some extra money, and this is a good slush fund to deal from.
I'm thinking.
So it says it was seized from an unnamed hacker. So someone stole his $3 billion. The government seized it back and then used $183 million to wipe out his restitution.
But how did they steal it back?
Dude, go. You know how they stole it back. Go read that article from a couple weeks ago about the child porn stuff with the IRS.
Yes. It's not a.
Sorry, not CSAM, not child porn.
The Justice Department announced that had.
That's completely different.
You know how they stole it.
It's all in these Wired articles. I didn't. Again, I did a very poor job of preparing stories for this week.
Vacation is important.
70,000 bitcoins from someone referred to only as individual X. It was an IRS criminal investigation that this hacker had stolen fortune from Silk Road.
Did you say it was an IRS investigation?
IRS criminal investigation.
Yeah,
similar to our story we covered 2 weeks ago, Larry.
Yeah, like that. I finally went back and read that story about 3 days ago. I was late, and damn. Yeah, the IRS follow the money.
Follow the money.
That was the evidence they had. They followed the money, and yep.
Well, it is that job.
Right? You're right.
I mean,
you're right.
They got to retrieve that money.
Not old wallets very well, and they're obviously not using their password managers very well. And like, there's just a series of stupidness here.
There is.
I don't understand how these. If I had $380 million in crypto, like, I would probably not have it in a hot wallet. I wouldn't have the key in a password vault. It would definitely be my head, and I definitely would want that in cold storage. Like, this just seems crazy that this is happening a lot.
But see, Tyler, you're smarter than the average bear, and that I think many of these folks that were in these types of cases, like the one from a couple weeks ago, that thought that Bitcoin was anonymous. And it's not. It's not, especially when you can get a subpoena for the crypto exchange.
Yep. On exchange, I mean, custodial really does make a huge difference, even from a liability standpoint. And, you know, whether or not the exchange has some morals and divvies out that money if it's stolen from them off their exchange, like, you don't protect the keys. You're given a subset of keys. So, like, really, people don't understand how all these exchanges work and, like, how your keys are actually being exchanged. That's the difference between the hot, cold wallet, custodial, and non-custodial. Those are very key differences in your threat vector and your ability to maintain and keep your keys safe.
Ah.
Oh boy. Well,
don't lose your wallet either, right?
No, don't. Yeah, I don't know anyone's lost a wallet.
I mean, a lost wallet is a safe wallet, right, Tyler?
I highly recommend a hardware crypto wallet. In fact, I just got one.
Just don't lose it.
I'll try not to lose it.
Don't lose it, and don't forget the password, or then you're talking to Joe Grand potentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that might be one for that embedded chip thing. Might be useful for something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Could be.
Yeah. Well, maybe implanted somewhere.
Alrighty. On that note, thank you everyone for listening and watching this edition of Paul's Security Weekly. See you next time.